Thank you, Marius. Very happy to be here. It's not my first time in Bucharest. I've been speaking at the end of last year about the same topic at the WordCamp, at the WordPress meetup here, so I hope it's not too much of a say it again, but there are many new things here. So let's get started. There's plenty of stuff, so I might go very quickly on some things. Yeah, as usual. So very quickly, I'm a plugin developer. I've been focusing from the start on SEO and content management plugins. And for what concerns today's talk, I've been developing a plugin called Wibbler AMP, which provides AMP features to WordPress sites. So that's what I'm doing. I'm not so much of a storyteller, so we are going to have a very classical presentation, very quickly review what AMP is, why you would want to use it, how you can do that on your WordPress sites, and a few things you have to pay attention to. And then the new things, the things that have appeared over basically the last 12 months. Many of you guys knew about Kubernetes, so I guess many of you know about AMP. Like, who doesn't know at all what AMP is? See, oh, there's one. Okay. Sorry, I might go quickly on some concept. So what it is, the first thing, the easiest way I think to tell you what AMP is to show you. So here you got 2 pages from The Guardian, which is a pretty large website in the UK, news website. On the left side, you got the non-AMP version of one of their page. On the right side, you got the AMP version. As you can see, what you can gather from that is there's pretty much no difference between the two. So what's all the fuzz about AMP then? If it's just something that lets you build the same page you already have, there's basically no point. So the interest you can see here, it might be a bit too small, but let's try. I've never done that in live, so let's see if it works. Yeah. This is a measure of the loading time in various parameters of loading time. This page loads in 3 seconds. That's the regular AMP page, this regular page of their site, loaded on a mobile phone, a standard mobile phone on a 4G network. So let me tell you first, that's pretty quick. That's a big page, and they're loaded in 3 seconds. So now, if I can go back. So now, the AMP page. This is what it looks like. That same page loads in 1.7 seconds. So basically by using AMP, they were able to reduce the load time of the page by 40% about that. So that's the main point in one thing. You get the same page, but you load it in 40% less at least. And that's a pretty good result because these guys are really fast. I mean, not many of your sites are going to load such a big page with so many things, many AJAX requests and all of that in 3 seconds. And just to mention it, it's even worse. If you look at that page on the same page on a good 3G network, something that might happen here, for instance, when you're inside a building or in some other places in Romania or elsewhere, then you got only a 3G network, and then this page here, this very same page from The Guardian's, eventually loads in 24 seconds. So that's the kind of page we're talking about. But there you go. That page on AMP still loads in 3-point-something seconds. So that's what we are looking after with AMP. Another example of that is from another, this time an Irish website. This page is a regular page. It's loading in about 12 seconds in full, but what you can see here is that it's loading piece by pieces. So you got first some text here, some titles. Still some data is coming, and we're still at 5 seconds. And then an image appears, and all of a sudden, the entire page is dropping down. Dropping down. So maybe you started reading the article that's on that page, and I'm sure you hate it just like I do. I'm starting reading something, and then some ads or some image comes in, and then something I was reading just disappeared from my view. So I hate that. That's one of the things you don't get with AMP, and that's pretty nice. The page is loading, not everything appears magically because the internet is the internet, but things stay in place. When this image appears, like only in 5 seconds, or total, the page is loaded in 5 seconds, then the rest is still where it was at the beginning. You can keep reading, you can keep using the page normally. So that's a great thing. Now, a more formal definition of AMP would be, from where I stand, it's a UI framework. It's a set of components that you can use to build web pages. It's a set of components like layouts container, and it goes from something very basic, from layouts container to select drop-down lists to full carousels of images and things like that. So it's a bit like Bootstrap for some of you who are in the front-end business. Foundation, semantic UI, it provides a set of components, but all of these components are meant to work together and are incredibly optimized for speed. They include all the best practices you can get, like lazy loading, and many other things that will make sure your page is fast, and it's fast even on a slow network. And that's great. Contrary to things like Bootstrap and Foundation, it doesn't come with a lot of CSS and styling, so you're pretty free to do what you want on that. You will have to work on it in many cases, but it doesn't come with all the styling, and you're not forced into just having the same Bootstrap styles that we see all over the place. Another major difference with Bootstrap and the other UI framework is that most of the time it's going to be possible to build the AMP version of a page automatically with the plugins. And that's great news for you. A little bit of history. This was started, as Marius mentioned, at the end of 2015 by Google. And it has taken up at about the same time that Facebook started the Facebook Instant Pages, and Apple did something like that also for their Apple News system. But really, today it's AMP that stayed, and it's really the largest technology similar to that. All of these technologies had the goal of displaying pages nearly instantly on mobile phones. Today, it has increased in size, and it's no more really a Google project. They shared recently that only 20% of the commits on GitHub, it's an open source project. About 20% of the commits are coming from Google people, 80% is coming from others, mostly the big companies like Twitter, eBay, and plenty of others. It's driven by a tech steering committee, and there's an advisory committee. And soon the control will be moved to a foundation. Today it's still owned by Google. They are the people doing, there's one single guy, basically the lead, who is doing making all the decisions in the end. But that's being moved to, all the control is being moved to a foundation. Key point, it's available on most platforms like WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, Magento, and many others. And it works the same on mobile and desktop, because basically what's good for working on your mobile is also good for working on the desktop. If it's fast on the desktop, then it's good as well. You got that site, ampbyexample.com, which can show you a little bit of what can be done with AMP. Now, who is using it? Consuming the AMP content, you've got basically two large categories. You've got search engines, Google, Bing, and Baidu. With that, you cover like 95% of the world search results. So all these guys, when somebody is doing a search on a mobile phone and they want to display a search result, if the site, that page they want to show has an AMP version, they'll show the AMP version instead of the regular responsive version because they think it's fast enough. And then there's another group of websites like Twitter, Medium, LinkedIn. Here they're only the biggest one, of course. And all these guys will do the same. If you share a link on Twitter and somebody is seeing your tweet on their mobile phone and they click because they want to see the site in question, that page, Twitter is going to show them the AMP version, if there's one, of course. Again, instead of showing them the responsive version that you probably all have, they'll see the AMP version. So it's pretty big. And then who is providing AMP content? Then you got that small list here of big news publisher site. And the new thing over the last 12 months or 18 months is that all the big e-commerce sites have converted to AMP, and we'll see why just a bit later. You got a big list of big names here, and you got our small name here, which is a demo site we have, and you can go there and see what we can do, for instance, with just a regular WordPress site or a WooCommerce site. And 25 million website at least, that's like 6 months ago, are also providing content. Now, you may have heard, but the speed improvement is all about Google Cache. It's fast because Google caches everything, and your pages are served from the Google servers, and that's bad. Well, that's not true. What's happening is that Google, and since very recently Bing, what they do is they indeed keep a copy of your AMP pages, so that when you're searching for something on Google, on your mobile phone again, instead of showing you, and you want to click and see that page, instead of showing you the actual page, the actual AMP page from your website, they're going to show you the copy they have on their server because it's just faster. So it really shows up instantly. There is no delay at all. But only Google and Bing do that. All the others, like Twitter and Medium and LinkedIn and all that, they just go to your site. The pages, the original pages, AMP pages, lives on your website. They are on your WordPress site. So that needs to be very clear. Okay, let's move on. Why would you want to use it? Well, it's fast. It's meant to be fast, but in itself, that's not really a goal. There are two benefits mainly to that. From a user standpoint, it's good. You like to have things that go fast on your mobile phone, especially when you're in some remote place and you don't have a good network, right? But for you, a faster site means that you'll have a better, what we call engagement. That is, people on fast websites, they're going to click more. They're going to be more willing to see the next page, to look at the next page on your site. They're going to be more willing to add to cart products. They're going to be more willing to subscribe to your newsletter. So that's what you get with AMP. There's another benefit that's what AMP was known first and foremost at the beginning, at least. There's the so-called SEO advantage. So let's be clear. Having AMP pages on your site is not going to make your site rank better. You're not going to move upwards into the rankings just because you have an AMP page. But if you have some ranking and you appear on a search page results, on the results in Google or Bing, then most likely your AMP page is going to benefit from a higher visibility. What you see here, for instance, here is a carousel. That's the top level. If your page goes here, we would all agree that you're going to get much more exposure. You're going to get a much better conversion rate from search results. So that's something we want to look at. Sorry, we now have a lot of data available, real-life data. That's all on the Google site, so you might want to go elsewhere. There are some studies by guys called Stone Temple, and there is other, I link to more at the end of the presentation, with experience over an extended period of time. That proves that, basically. So now, how would you go ahead and implement that on your site? Well, it goes through plugins, as is very common in the WordPress world. Automatic has been providing from day one an AMP plugin, which is rather simple, although it has improved dramatically over the last 6 months by Google paid developers to work on it, basically. And how it works is that you select some content on your site, and that content is going to be converted to AMP on the fly when needed. Unfortunately, the plugin will basically remove everything on the page that's not suitable for AMP, or it doesn't know how to convert. And it pretty much does not implement any form of interactivity. So you don't have like buttons or registration or anything like that. Fortunately, there are several other plugins at least, and we are one of the providers of that. So how does it work? Well, the next thing you have to do with that, obviously, you're convinced by now, is to build your website with AMP. And I would like to share 5 key points about how you would go about and do that. The first thing you have to make is to decide whether you're going to have what's called a canonical AMP site, or whether you're going to go for the more traditional way of doing it, which is alternate. When you do a canonical site, all your pages are AMP. There's no regular HTML site. It's like you're just using like Bootstrap or React to build a website, except you're using AMP. That's pretty good. That's pretty efficient. That's pretty SEO friendly. But you may run into some limitation now or in the future in terms of features. So you want to be careful about that and properly evaluate what you're going to do. Obviously, it's easier to do on new sites. And it's also easier and faster if the site is rather simple. That would be probably a good option for a blog, for instance. Now, the more traditional way of doing it is what's called alternate, or sometimes paired, where you have your regular site with a responsive website as well. And then for each page of the site, or some pages of the site, there's an AMP version that's created by the plugin. And this is the most common way because it gives you, you can use all the plugins you want, all the themes and all of that, and you use them on your regular site, but the AMP version is like an alternate version that Google, Twitter, and others can use. So that's the key decision to make first. The second important point, in my opinion, is to, once you have a page which is AMP, you need to stay AMP as much as possible. So the links to other parts of your websites, which should be there, they have to be to other AMP pages as well. If you have a search page, it should show AMP search results, and you should have a search box. If you link to other products, related products, things like that, then it should be also to AMP. That's controversial. Many people want to go back to the site, but I'm saying that AMP is about conversion and engagement, so you need to have a consistent user experience. The third thing I'd like to talk about, and that one is really important, is you have to keep maximum interactivity on your AMP pages. You need to have newsletter sign up, you need to have account creation, you need to have contact forms, add to cart, all of these features, commenting. You need to have that on your AMP pages, otherwise people are not going to be able to engage with the page. That's what you're doing that for. You want customers, you want visitors to engage with you. The fourth point is that it has to be consistent. The design has to be consistent. I've put back the example from The Guardian. That's what you're aiming for. You want your pages basically looks the same. The AMP page and the standard page should pretty much look the same. That's the goal. And again, the question here is about consistency for the user experience. If they switch from AMP to regular pages, they need to be on the same site. They need to feel like they are on the same site. Okay. There's no number on this one, but that's a counterexample of just what I was saying. Initially, in many sites, they just install the basic AMP plugin, and when you do that, this is what you get. And that's terrible. That's terrible for two things, because all the features of your regular site has been lost, so there won't be much engagement from visitors. And the second really terrible thing is that there are like 300,000 websites which are doing exactly the same thing. And they all have their AMP pages that look exactly the same thing. So that's the worst thing you can do. And if your AMP pages are like that, I would really suggest that you remove the plugin and you try to do better, or just don't do AMP. That's not for you. That happens to a company called Kinsta.com. That's really bad. That's a bad example. Okay, here is the fifth page, which is a continuation of what I've just been saying. There are a few things you need to pay attention when you implement AMP. The first thing is that there's a standard. It's called, and you need your AMP pages to be compliant with this standard. They need to validate. If they don't validate, if the AMP is broken, there's some bad tags or something, then the pages are not going to be taken into account by search engines and other sites using AMP. So That's very important. If your pages are not valid, it's just like you're not doing AMP. You're wasting your time. Second thing is content mismatch. It's a new thing, a relatively new thing. It happens when you have an alternate, a paired implementation, and your standard pages don't have, or your AMP pages do not have the same content, more or less, as the AMP pages, as the original pages. The two type of pages, they must share basically the same content. If not, then Google in particular, and Bing at least as well, are simply going to drop your pages from the your AMP pages from the index and not use them at all. So you're going to be wasting your time again. And the reason they do that is that at the start, basically, many people were wanting to benefit from the, the SEO benefits, so they would do like a basic page with just click here to go to our website. And of course, they don't want that. They want real high quality content on AMP pages. The third thing is analytics. You want to use analytics, but there's a small gotcha. You need to use something that's called Client ID API, so that AMP pages views and regular pages views are linked together, and the page counts and everything is working fine. Good plugins will do that for you. And the last thing is about the carousel. You may remember on Google search results, I show you a carousel of images with AMP results. If you want to have a chance to be displayed there, you need to have structured data in the form of JSON LD JSON inserted into your page. And for that to work, you need to have an image associated with that page, and that image needs to be big. It must be 1200 pixels wide, and there are more specific. So pay attention to that, otherwise you don't stand a chance to be in the carousel. Okay. Yeah. Okay, sorry, that's real quick, I know, but that's it. So what's new? There are two things I wanted to talk about, and luckily you have more details. You had more details already, and you have more details later today. Progressive web apps is something somebody will be talking about later today, and I just wanted to mention that it's a perfect fit with AMP. The AMP framework provides full support for progressive web apps. It's really easy to use them, and they just really work together very well. It might be a good way to do something that's really like an app for you. You can, for instance, provide offline features for your website really easily. So it works really well. It's a bit more involved in terms of technology, but it's really doable and it works really well. And the second thing I wanted to talk about is AMP stories, which really I should have dropped the AMP and just leave stories. It's a new format, relatively new format. It relates to what Ivana told us at the beginning of the day. It's a really easy way to implement stories on your website. So I'm sure you're familiar with stories, which is something we see normally. I think it originated on Snapchat or Instagram, or one copies the other. Yeah, Snapchat and then Instagram copied that, right? But still, it's now very common, except it happens most of the times on mobile apps in a closed thing, in a closed apps. With AMP stories, which is just a few HTML elements and a few lines of code, you can build things like that. That's from CNN, obviously. Yeah, you can build things like that with a few lines, and these things are AMP, and they are very fast. They work very well on any kind of phone, very quickly, even on a slow network, and it's really easy for you because it's just like a new page on your website. So that's a very efficient way of building AMP stories, or stories. That's just it. Soon, these AMP stories are going to be integrated in a carousel at the top of Google search images. So if you're into SEO, that's a pretty big thing coming up. You definitely want to have that sort of thing. And of course, for storytelling, as Ivana said this morning, it's very good support. That's pretty much it. Here are a few links to the AMP project itself, to our website, and to a couple of people who have done presentations and provide data about AMP. That's it. Mulțumesc frumos! Do you have time for a question?
Yeah, we have time for questions.
If any? Right.
Hi, my name is Korea. Thank you very much for the presentation and for all the great information provided. So I have two questions. I'll try to keep them short. The first one is, from an SEO perspective, we focus a lot on internal linking and internal linking structure. And with AMP, you're pretty much giving all that link power over to Google. Is that something that can be taken into consideration? Is that something that can be fixed, or do we just accept it as it is? So that's one. And the second question would be, if there is any sort of workaround to pretty much get Google Analytics working with AMP pages as similar as possible to the normal usage of analytics, because that's a different implementation. Thank you very much again.
Okay, so the second question is easier. I already replied to that. Analytics works exactly the same, and they match visits very easily. The only thing you have to do is use the AMP client ID thing here. So it's done by our plugin, for instance. It's one instruction to put on the analytics on AMP pages, and you got to have one line of code in your JavaScript snippets on your regular pages. So that's a solved issue. It's been solved for like a year. The second question is even simpler. It just doesn't work like that. You don't give any linking power to Google at all. When you do links, you link to AMP pages, and everything I said about linking to AMP pages, you link to your own site. You never, ever link to Google. It has to be understood. That's what I think I mentioned that at the beginning on the slide about the cache. The cache is just something that Google is doing to speed up the display on their search results pages. But each and every page, whether on their cache or even your own AMP pages living on your own site, which are the original AMP pages, they all have a canonical to the standard page. So when somebody is sharing the URL of a AMP page living on Google cache, it doesn't matter at all from an SEO standpoint or anything, because this page is canonicalized to your website. Every page, every AMP page has that. And when I mentioned stay AMP and do link to other related products or other articles on AMP pages, and I said AMP, link to the AMP version, I absolutely meant link to your website AMP versions. So it's going to be typically mysite.com/myarticle/AMP, and that's your own website. And that page is canonicalized to the original page, mysite.com/myarticle. So this is a known issue from an SEO standpoint. It's just a known issue that does not exist. Yeah, there were more questions.
To extend a bit on the linking, as a developer, you control the links that you generate in templates and whatnot, related items. What about the links that maybe a content editor would put into the content? Is there a way to intercept those and append to them?
That depends on the plugin and how it's implemented. In our plugin, it's an option. You basically, like when you have you create your menu in WordPress normally, as you would, and you have like a checkbox in the settings where you can say this menu items, I want them AMP or I want them regular, and so on. And then for links into content, you have ways of saying, like with shortcodes and things like that, you have ways of saying this link I want it to be AMP instead. So it's really easy to do. But most of it is automatic. You select it globally. Yeah. There were more questions here.
Hi, I'm Andre. I have a question regarding AMP and accessibility. When creating a custom IME page, will it be WCAG compliant?
I can't say about the standard. The important thing is that it's still HTML, so it depends basically on what you create. What I can say is that all the components offered by Google, like in the framework that were originally developed, and all the other ones that were added, for instance, for e-commerce or things like that by others, these are absolutely, because it's a recent framework, they paid a lot of attention to that. So it's all accessible. I can't say, I can't comment on the actual, certification or validation. I would assume they do, but accessibility is built in, like it's usable with the keyboards and things like that. It's absolutely happening. Yeah, that's one of the benefits of using a framework versus doing everything yourself. You get the speed, but you also get that sort of things out of the box.
So, is it possible to skip the regular version of the site and do straight AMP pages from the beginning?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I called a canonical site. That's the first decision you have to make. Either you do a site that's entirely and uniquely AMP, or you do a site which is, obviously if you have already an existing site, you're just going to put AMP on top, probably. It's going to be an alternate version. But if you're building a new site, and the site fits the specification of AMP and it works well with it, you can also absolutely do a fully AMP site. At this time, when that happens, there's no /AMP at the end. You just get regular URLs. And like I said, it's pretty good, it's pretty quick, it's pretty light, it's pretty easy to do, and it's pretty good for SEO. So yeah, if your requirements match things that can be done with AMP, then you're good. Absolutely.
Sites made like that?
No, definitely not. You have sites, if you have a lot of interactivity, if you want to run custom JavaScript to do things, connect databases here and there, that's not going to work well with AMP. So probably you don't want to do that. But a large number of sites would be good.
We have time for one more question. I have one question, small question. It's count the hosting with AMP.
AMP pages are living on your website, so it counts. The hosting counts just as well as for your other pages. The thing is, AMP pages are usually lighter, less HTML, less scripts, analytics scripts and things like that. It's much more optimized. So usually they would do better. You'll be better off on a slow host with AMP pages than with regular pages. That's a general statement. But otherwise, the server power, let's say, impacts things the same because it's the server that's going to be building the HTML and the page itself. So it works the same. Yeah, do we have time for him?
Okay, hi. I have a question regarding Google indexing and pages. So from time to time we get this email like AMP validation errors. Mm-hmm. But you go to the pages, they all validate fine. What's up with that error?
That should not happen. The one thing that may happen is that there are two sorts of validation. There's the AMP validation itself, and sometimes the error you have is not about the AMP validation itself, but it's more about the structured data validation. For instance, I mentioned that if you have some structured data and you have an image that you have associated with that article to be shown on a carousel or something, maybe that image, that's typical, maybe that image is too small. It doesn't fit the 1200 pixels limit.
So it's another type of validation?
Yeah, it's a structured data validation. In the plugins, you got two buttons to validate your pages, and you can go to the online validators to that. I didn't put the links here, but there are online validators for each of those, and you can use. There's also Chrome and Firefox extensions. We are doing actually. I've just done it. It's being published right now for Chrome and Firefox to help in that process.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.